My name is Francis, and if you're new to this channel, consider hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell because I post a new video every single day. If you want to become a private client, then consider applying for a free consultation by hitting the website that's in the description box of this video. I also wanted to announce that my mindfulness group coaching program is starting very soon. So if you still want to be part of the class before I close off enrollment, hit the link that's in the description box of this video. In this video, what I'm going to be talking about is what consciousness actually is. Okay, what is consciousness? Because consciousness is one of the most difficult things to explain on this planet at this time right now. Because consciousness is actually what makes up your entire experience. Your experience is a result of consciousness. Consciousness comes before everything in your life. Consciousness comes before thoughts. Consciousness comes before feelings. Consciousness comes before emotions. Consciousness comes before any sense perception or anything that you're looking at. Consciousness is what makes up this entire reality. But it's hard to explain what consciousness actually is because consciousness is actually not the experience itself, but it's the thing that the experience comes from. Okay, so consciousness is, the field that is happening in the background of all form. So I'm going to try to explain this to you in the most simple way that I can possibly explain to you because this is pretty complicated, but I'm going to try to make it very simple so that you can actually understand this. Okay, so reality is made up of forms. Okay, forms are thoughts. That's a thought form. Your emotion is a form. It comes into consciousness and then it goes. It's always changing. Okay, forms are always changing. Forms are never stable and they're always continually changing every single moment, right? Your thoughts are changing, your feelings are changing, your emotions are changing. Everything in your reality is continually changing. Okay, that's pretty much what your reality is made up of, is thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and anything that you can experience is made up of your reality. That's what your reality is made up of, at least, is those experiences. And so when you start to realize what consciousness is, you will realize that consciousness actually comes before all form. Okay, it's the formless part of who you are. It's the part of you that comes before anything, that comes before any form. So form is not consciousness. Form comes from consciousness, but consciousness is not form. And so consciousness is just the thing happening in the background. It's the field of consciousness happening in the background of all things. And explaining this is so difficult because it's hard to make that differentiation between form and consciousness until you actually become conscious of this yourself. Because most people think that you could just learn this right away. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But not just on a conceptual level, but to actually see what consciousness is on an experiential level is the key here. Because people are lost in the form of reality, not realizing the true sense of peace that can come just simply becoming aware of your own consciousness. Okay, because how do you know that you exist right now? How do you know that you exist before a thought comes in and tells you that you exist? You just know, you have that sense of I exist right now. That's consciousness. But to become aware of that is to become conscious of consciousness. Okay, and that might seem like, what are you talking about right now? How can you become conscious of consciousness? You can. You can literally become conscious of your own consciousness. You can become aware of awareness itself. And that is where the true peace comes from, because when you do this, you start to realize that you are not your thoughts, you are not your feelings, you are not your emotions, you are not any form in reality, because there's the consciousness to witness it. And if there's the witness of something, then you can't be that thing. And I'm not going to beat around the bush in this video. I'm just going to give it to you straight. You are just pure empty awareness. You are just pure consciousness. That's all you are. But most people attach to the forms, creating a sense of self from the forms, clinging onto reality, and that's what creates most of the suffering in their life. Most of your suffering comes from your inability to disattach from the changing forms of reality, your thoughts, feelings, emotions, even your own body. And that's ultimately what your life is going to come down to, is to accept that forms are impermanent and always changing. And when you can come to accept this, you might feel like, okay, well, that would be very disempowering. Well, in fact, it wouldn't be disempowering. it would be the most empowering thing that you can do. Disempowering yourself would be to resist the change of reality and not realize the truth of who you are, which is just pure consciousness and pure love. And that's what reality is made up of, is just consciousness. But to become aware of this is where the true peace actually comes, because most people are unconsciously absorbed in their thinking mind without even realizing it. And this creates a lot of suffering, because rather than living your life as consciousness, rather than living your life as the witnessing presence, we absorb ourselves into our thinking and we get consumed by the forms of reality, which happen to be thoughts for most people. But when you're attached to your thoughts, to thought forms, you're pretty much attached to everything, because most of your identity comes from thought forms. And if you're attached to your thought forms, you're probably attached to your emotions as well, and your body, and every other single experience. So when you can realize that you're not your thoughts, but you become your thoughts when you're unconscious of them. That's what the ego is. The ego is when you're unconsciously absorbed in your thinking so much, where there's no differentiation between being the consciousness and being the thoughts. You literally become your thoughts. You become your emotions. It's not that you have thoughts in that moment, or you have an energy field of an emotion coming up of anger. You become your anger. You become those thoughts, and those thoughts consume your attention, and you don't realize that there is a distinction between awareness and thoughts. Okay, that's the distinction you want to make. When you make a distinction in your life between awareness and form, awareness and thinking, awareness and emotions, awareness and feelings, awareness and any sense perception, you start to separate those two things, and you start to become more conscious of what consciousness actually is. Because it's not that you just have this experience and that's it. It's that you have an experience, but there's something there that has the ability to become conscious of the experience, including all your thoughts. And so when you can start to do things like meditation, do some consciousness work, that's why it's called consciousness work, you'll start to realize that there's a distinction between who you really are, which is pure consciousness and pure empty awareness, and the thoughts about who you think you are. You can create that separation and say, okay, wait a second, here I am as the consciousness, as the awareness, and there's the thoughts. And there's something there that can observe those thoughts, and that is what we call consciousness. We call that empty awareness. Empty awareness, because it's not that the awareness is something. The awareness is not something. The awareness is literally nothing. It's no thing. That's why you call it empty awareness, because the form gets filled into the awareness. You see what I'm saying? It's so hard to explain this, because awareness and consciousness is not a thing. Awareness and consciousness is literally not a thing. It's nothing. But it's not just the concept of nothing. It's honest to God, nothing, and it will never be a form. So it's so hard to explain. It's the thing that comes before any form in your reality. And so when you start to realize this, you're going to feel very empowered, because you'll start to realize that, there's a sense of peace that comes just from, you get the sense of peace just from noticing that you are consciousness, that you are awareness, that you are just love. Consciousness is love, because as you become more conscious, you become more loving, not in the lovey-dovey way, but actual love, true love, which is just truth and consciousness. And so when you start to realize this, you create that distinction between you and your thoughts, and you stop attaching to your thought processes. You stop attaching to the story. You stop attaching to the emotions. Not that you're suppressing them and disconnected from them. In fact, it's the opposite. You become even more aware of them. You're just not attached to them, because you're living your life not as a person, but as pure empty awareness and pure consciousness, as the witness, as the observer. And when you connect it as part of yourself, that's what a spiritual awakening really is. But the thing that you have to understand is that these words that I'm using are not actually what consciousness is. Any word that I give you is not what actually consciousness is. Any word that I try to explain is not what consciousness actually is. I'm just pointing you to what consciousness actually is. I can use words, but words are only pointers. Words are limited. The human language is not actually consciousness. A book is not actually consciousness. A book telling you what consciousness is, and then you're thinking, oh, that's what consciousness is. That's not consciousness. Consciousness comes before all of that. And you have to become conscious of that to realize it. And to realize it is going to be a hefty thing to do. Definitely not easy by any means, but you can become conscious of this. You don't just take my word for it. Don't just believe me, because believing me will not give you the practical benefit of becoming more conscious and realizing your consciousness. Because when you realize your consciousness and you are consciousness, and that's what you are, is that you will start to disidentify from your thoughts, disidentify from your feelings. You're going to live your life more as the observer, and you're going to be able to let go of a lot of past trauma and anger and fear and worry in a much easier way, because you're not attached to the forms of reality anymore. You start to access the formless part of who you are. There's the human, and then there's the being. There's the human being. Being is consciousness. That's what being is. Being is consciousness. Being is not something that you're doing. It's something that you are already, but you're not conscious of it. So it's the formless part of who you are. An interesting word there. It's not a form. So then what the hell is it? It's the thing that comes before form, because formless is not a form. Consciousness is not a thing. It's no thing. Okay. In some cultures they call it, I believe they call it the I before the I am. Okay, the I before the I am. So it's that sense of I, the true I, that comes before any thoughts of I am something. It's the true sense of I, the true sense of existence, the true sense of who you really are, that you've always known intuitively, but you never connected to this part of yourself because you were unconsciously absorbed in your ego, in the false sense of self. Your true self is just pure consciousness. That's what you are. And when you start to become conscious of this, there's a lot of practical benefits that come to this. This is not just philosophy. This is not just new age, concepts. This is literally you becoming aware of what and who you actually are in reality. Okay, and there's so many practical benefits to this, because when you're not attached to the role, to the character of these forms, the forms, you're not attached to the forms, you can start to become more emotionally intelligent. You can start to become more unreactive. You can stop feeding into negative emotions and let them go much easier. You can start becoming more present to the moment and enter a flow state where you're so involved in the work that you're doing that you're not attached to your thinking, and stuff starts to happen naturally to you. You will start to connect to universal intelligence and let that creativity flow out of you. Because creativity can only go so far when you're attached to your ego and have a false sense of self. True creativity comes from consciousness. Comes from a place of no mind, as Eckhart Tolle calls it. Comes from a place of disidentification from your thoughts. That's where true creativity comes from. That's where your true power comes from, is when you can disattach from the forms of reality and find the truth of who you actually are, which is just pure consciousness. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. If you like this kind of content, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Once again, my mindfulness group coaching program is now open. So if you want to be part of the class that's closing very, very soon, the enrollment is closing. Once the class starts, I'm not going to be taking on any more people. Hit the link that's in the description box of this video. If you want to become a private client, then once again, hit the link that's in the description box of this video. Hit the like button if you found this kind of information useful. Have yourself a great day, and see you in the next video.